Welcome to the Art of Procurement podcast with your host, Philip Eidson. Here, thought leaders share the trends, strategies, and tactics that you can use to elevate the role of procurement and your career.
Hi there, and welcome to the Art of Procurement. I'm the host, Philip Eidson. So this was the first episode that I recorded for the Art of Procurement. My guest, Tania Seary, was really very gracious in accepting my interview request, and she really did that without hesitation. You may know Tania as the founder of the Faculty and the Source, two procurement-related consultancy and recruitment businesses in Australia, and then most recently Procurious. So in our conversation, Tania and I touched on a wide range of subjects, from the changing direction of procurement careers to the ways in which a procurement leader can use social media to their advantage. With that being said, let's go straight into the show. Okay, well, welcome to the show today. So I'm delighted to welcome Tania Seary as the guest today. So Tania is the founder of three companies, all that focus on the development of the procurement profession. Those are the Faculty, the Source, and more recently, Procurious. So Tania, thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you very much.
So before we start, I had, I was doing some background information and had a really quirky story that I saw you reference in one of your posts. So I thought I would answer it. I thought I would ask it just as first question. And it's really that you have an interesting story regarding how you came across the Procurious domain name, the URL, and where you had to purchase it from.
That's right. One of our team came up with the name Procurious, which we loved because we wanted a place where procurement professionals around the world who were curious could come to one spot and get the knowledge they wanted, so hence Procurious. But of course, just like all new companies, when we went to purchase the domain, we found out that it was owned by somebody else. And when we tracked that owner down, we actually found that it wasn't being used, which was good, but the original intention for the website was actually to promote a strip club in San Diego. So there you go. It's a California story, like a lot of IT companies, but not what you would expect. So, so we were happy to purchase it from him.
A little bit of a different negotiation than what you would usually be used to in procurement.
That's right.
So going a little bit into your background, so I don't know if you could give me just a couple of minutes as an overview of kind of how you came into the procurement profession, and also what made you decide to take the leap and form a procurement consulting firm when you were back in Australia.
Yes, yeah. Well, I mean, when I first got into procurement probably 15 years ago, it was very much an emerging profession. I'd finished my MBA in the United States, in Pittsburgh or Pennsylvania, and people were finishing their MBAs to get into this profession where you could make $1 million overnight, or should I say save $1 million overnight, and really become a corporate superstar. So I'd been working in sales and marketing up until that point, but I really fell in love with procurement and the change that it could drive and the value it could drive. So I got a job with Alcoa in Pittsburgh. I'm getting my cities mixed up here. And then after really doing a lot of, the startup work for the global team there, I then decided to move back to Australia and started my own company specialising in procurement because, it was my new passion and it still is my passion. And really started a best practice consultancy there. I think what's led me to Procurious, and, I'm now based in London, have been for the last 2 years, has been that all the way through my career, I saw the power of collaboration. So when we were starting up leverage procurement at Alcoa in Pittsburgh, we had to bring together 25 locations around the world to do leverage buying, and I'm sure there's a lot of category managers out there who can relate to that situation. So we used to have to use a lot of face-to-face meetings, a lot of telephone hookups to bring everyone together and to learn from each other. So I think that was the first. Then when I went to Australia, I started a round table service for CPOs. So throughout my procurement career, I've really seen the benefit and the need for people being able to share knowledge, and that's what Procurious helps everyone do.
Right. And so when you started the faculty back in Australia, so you came from the US
Yes.
with a procurement background, but that wasn't where you were. First, you talked about sales and marketing. So did you have a procurement network when you came to Australia to set up the faculty, or
No,
were you kind of starting from scratch?
I started from absolute scratch. I did not have one procurement contact at all. So, I like a challenge.
Right.
So I had to build a network from nothing. And I also had to start a business from nothing. So this sort of scorched earth scenario is something I seem to relish. And, of course, then I picked the hardest people in the world to sell to, the procurement profession. You can't put anything over procurement professionals. So, but I've actually enjoyed that. I like transparency and being upfront, and I've always enjoyed that in working with the procurement profession and being part of it. So, I started from scratch, but that was at the stage where there were a lot of marketplaces, and I was fortunate to actually be engaged with my first client by a marketplace. So I met a lot of the leading CPOs, and that really helped me get started.
Yeah, it's hard enough starting something when you're in the have a network, but without having a network, I can only imagine how much more difficult that was.
Well, that's right, and I mean, you're starting your business and this podcast show, and I'm sure that you'll experience those challenges as well.
Right.
But they're very exciting.
Yeah, and when you got things off the ground with the faculty, I read that you were looking at building a culture, not a company. So that's something that really interested me. Kind of what were you looking to build when you set off with the faculty?
Well, look, the number one thing when you start your own business is the absolute luxury is that you're creating a place where you can go to work. And so I made the most of that opportunity and decided that I really wanted to work with very smart people who really cared about a high quality output and, who shared my values. And I actually had to do a fair bit of work myself to determine what my values were. And what my values are is I love working in a team. I love people with high energy, like people who take accountability for what they do, people who are committed to excellence and that are honest. So really those were the founding values, and that's what we tried to recruit against. I can't say I've always got it right, but you generally, if you know what kind of culture you're trying to build in an organisation, it really helps you recruit, retain and performance manage people.
Right. No, that's great, especially when you take the leap to set up your own firm. You certainly don't want to then build somewhere that you don't want to be. So
Exactly.
absolutely makes sense that you kind of put who do I want to work around
exactly
as the key pillar, and that's something you miss sometimes.
Exactly, and starting your own business, you do have a lot of dark days. I mean, there's a lot of soul searching because you are putting yourself out on a limb and putting yourself out to the universe, as you could say,
right.
And it does cause a lot of self-reflection anyway. So it's a good time to use that for positive and work out what your personal values are. So every negative has a positive.
Right. And so after the faculty launched, a couple of years later, well, actually, it looks like 6 or 7 years later, you then launched The Source, which appears to be kind of an extension of the faculty, at least using the same, leveraging the same client base. And that was focused more on recruitment.
That's right. By that stage, a lot of people were contacting me for recommendations for people, and I really couldn't service that. And I always like to look after my clients. And I did feel that there was a gap in the Australian market, at least, for a really high-quality service. But I still think that we all have a lot to learn about recruitment. I don't think people put enough value on the actual recruitment process. Right. I think it is important to retain your recruitment company and build a relationship with them so that they can really represent you in the market and get the best people. I get concerned by, just relying on online or just relying on, throwing it out to your, to whoever's the fastest to respond. I think there's a big role to play, in the service and relationship side, but it can be fast-tracked through, social media and online as well. So I think there's a role to play for both.
Yeah, and what's always interesting, this is the advice that I give people who are kind of ask me about career and career development, is that the best people always have options. And so as a company, to be able to hire the best people, it's kind of a role reversal. You need to make a case of why somebody should come and join you, rather than expect that you're going to have all the best candidates in the world come to you and you can just take your pick from one of them. And not everybody thinks that way.
That's right. And funnily enough, what we've been doing a lot of at Procurious is running social media workshops and talking about how procurement or CPOs should be using social media to win the war for talent. And just to your point, I don't think people realise how much their online profile says about them and how potential employees are making decisions about whether they want to work for you or not. And I've really tried to warn or educate as many CPOs and hiring professionals as I can that, guys, you need to update your online presence because you're missing out on the best candidates if it's out of date.
Right. It's because the market, even in even when it's a weak market, the best people still have options.
Oh, that's right. That's right. And you need to be coming up in their feed, if they're connected and across all the issues, you need to be popping up and almost luring them away from whatever they're doing and making them feel like they want to come and work for you.
So I just have one other question before touching on the launch of Procurious, and that's related kind of to the accessing of procurement talent. And I read something that you wrote that really resonated with me, and that's that the belief the future belongs to, I think what you term nano niche players. I'm just really interested in what you mean by that, and how do you think that's going to impact the procurement career of the future?
Well, I mean, I just think it opens up so many exciting opportunities for the profession. So when I started in procurement 15 years ago, you were predominantly a sourcing manager, and I had an exciting job. I was a global category manager. That was the new thing. And as the profession has developed, there's more and more niches that people can specialise in. So obviously your category would be your original ones, but now we're seeing things like social procurement. You can be a specialist in that. You can be an alliance director. You can, there's just so many different options now because the profession has developed and businesses can see the value in investing in their team. And there's so many compliance, innovation requirements that you can continue to specialise. And I would really encourage the ambitious people in our profession to seek out those opportunities and to, develop a specialisation in something that will be in demand.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with that more. So that's actually something in my own career that when I was starting in procurement, I thought of myself as, I want to try and touch everything so that I have an understanding of everything. But, being more of a generalist, and I certainly, that may have been good 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and even today, can get you by. But I definitely think that the future is about subject matter expertise. Definitely.
And, your expertise of outsourcing, that didn't exist 15 years ago. And, and I think as businesses, like Procurious, social media for procurement, you're an outsourcing supplier. At the start, we were just procurement consultancies, but now I think that if you want to develop a global niche, you've got to be, or global competitive advantage, you've got to be in a nano niche. So you've got to specialise within procurement.
Yeah, and that's what when I set up my company, I thought, I have experience across an awful lot of areas of procurement, and there's a number of areas where I can help companies. But to stand out and to really kind of attack an area of the market, then I really need to focus on one thing and do one thing well,
right.
and kind of be the best at that one thing.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so do you think this is going to change how companies access talent? Because, you now have a lot of people who are specialized, but only the biggest companies can really afford that full time. So it's kind of an explosion of, well, one, outsourcing, but I think that outsourcing is just a vehicle kind of as part of a larger trend. I'm not sure if the Uberization, for the want of a better word, of procurement talent is going too far, but do you think that there'll be, we're going to have a much more of a flexible labor force that companies can tap into to kind of get access to more fractional resources rather than hiring people directly?
Oh, absolutely. And I think if you look at the trend around work hours and the need for flexibility, absolutely. And I think that contingent, not so much the contingent market, but that contracting market is a big opportunity. And I think it's currently underserved at the moment. So hopefully Procurious can fill a bit of a gap there. We'll be launching our jobs board within the next sort of 3 to 4 months, and we are seriously. Oh, I better not tell anyone this. Oh, hang on, I am. We're really thinking about focusing on contractor market because I think there's a big need there. A big need.
No, absolutely. I see that's kind of. I'm not sure how fast it's going to happen, but I think it's an inevitability that companies will end up contracting more directly, maybe through consulting firms, it may be through more as-a-service outsourcing firms, but I think that the model where companies just hire internally and hire journalists if they don't have the scale to hire specialists, I think that we're coming to the end of that age. So moving to Procurious, and I know you wrote that you looked at a number of different related businesses before settling on Procurious. What is it that jumped out about Procurious that you thought, that's the one that we really want to go after?
Well, it's really about scale and being global. I use the analogy. Last year I was looking through National Geographic, and I'm not sure if you saw this photo, but there are these tribes in Brazil that have been previously uncontacted by the Western world, and some of the imagery was amazing. There's people coming out from their grass huts with brandishing spears and looking up at this aerial photographer. And sometimes that's what I feel parts of the procurement profession are. They're uncontacted.
Right.
We have apparently 3.5 million procurement professionals around the world. When I think about it, I can probably only, estimate about 1 million. When we look at SIPS membership, ISM membership, some of the large companies, we've got to make sure we include the consultancies because all those consultants are in procurement. It's hard to get up to 1 million people, isn't it? So there's a lot of people out there who are doing the good thing, doing their procurement role, and are pretty much isolated. So I wanted to create something where they could connect with the world, other people in their industry or other people managing the same category, and they could create relationships with them and learn from each other. I also think that, times are tough. Everyone's watching costs, and that we should be looking at online learning as a really viable option for supplementing our professional development. So that was another thing that we felt was important. Events which help you learn and connect with people, we're really wanting to highlight that. And really, the big hit on Procurious has been the discussions because particularly the millennials, they want to get online and ask questions, and we've had something like 500 questions posted and thousands of answers. So that's been a really rewarding part of the journey for our team, is just to see people using the platform. And that's what we do. We get a lot of questions, from people who think they may be competing with us, and we say, look, this is a platform we've created for the profession. We want everyone there. We want all the consultancies posting their white papers. We want everyone sharing their e-learning, so that this is really a go-to place for the profession. And then people can, make their own decisions about who they want to talk to further or follow or what have you. So,
really building a hub for the profession, essentially.
That's right, exactly.
And it's so one of the issues with social media is that the signal to noise ratio, is so low that there's so much out there. You've got to go through a lot of weeds to find something that's really valuable. So I think that's one of the benefits of Procurious for sure, is kind of putting it all in one place, so that I don't think that, as you say, the other networks aren't really competing because nobody's going to stop using them. But when you want dedicated procurement related information, then it's a great place to go.
That's right, and that's what we feel exactly, is that a lot of the other channels are noisy, and hopefully this can just be a bespoke channel for procurement professionals, and where they can talk, get down to business very quickly.
Right. And how has the vision evolved? So it's been a couple of years since you launched. I imagine that,
Well, it's only been a year and a few months. So
okay.
Look, this is what you see today online is our, as they call it in the tech industry, our MVP, so our minimal viable product. So we had a lot of ideas, and we really had to be disciplined to get it down to something that we think would be easy for people to use from the get-go and wouldn't overwhelm people with, widgets and features. So now we'll be launching the app in a few months. We've had a lot of people asking for the app because that'll help them access on the road and connect with people more easily. So that's probably the first big addition or tech rollout that we're having. And then after that, we'll have the jobs board. We were hesitant to have a jobs board because we thought, to be honest, it was a little bit cliched, but we have had a lot of demand from our community saying, it'd be great if we could look for jobs here. So we've always said we want to follow what the community wants, and I think that's the key to any community, whether it's offline or online, is that you need to be responsive and make sure that what you're offering is what people want. So we'll do that, and further down the road we'll just keep developing as required.
Exciting times, and it's always hard to kind of scale back, and I'm sure that, so I have the same thoughts in my business. There's lots of things you want to do, but you don't want to overwhelm everybody and then nobody really know what it is that, you've got too many options. So
that's right. It's very much, yes, that's right. You've got to really be disciplined and be clear about what you're offering, because people are selling all the time, and people are trying to work out how it can apply to them. So you've got to be really clear with what your value proposition is.
So moving on to how procurement professionals can kind of lever social media. A lot of, I'd say, procurement professionals will have a LinkedIn profile. They may be on LinkedIn every now and then, but people who use social media more than that is more, I'd say, the exception rather than the norm right now. So how do you think that a procurement leader or a procurement professional can use social media to their benefit?
Well, look, as a leader, you're always obsessed with getting the best people, and that's going to make your job easier. It's going to make your team perform better, and so I think that is the number one reason why any CPO or procurement leader should have their profile up to date, obviously on Procurious and on LinkedIn, and really look at the way they're represented, a good photo, a good summary, not just like a CV, but potentially something that they really believe in.
Some
whether it's innovation. Yeah, exactly. People do not want to work for droids. They want to work for real people. I think most employees would like to see that you've written something in your life or spoken at a conference or have some view on something, and I think that's important to come up front. But then, just a decent summary of your career without going too far. And look, most of my team think testimonials are not to be taken too much notice of, but I actually do think if I see someone who's got 100 plus recommendations or what have you, I think it says something that they are recognised or at least have enough people looking at their profile. So I think that's good, and And we also encourage people, so if you've got a good profile and you're just getting started, you can do a lot for your image and communicating to your team and your suppliers about just even sharing things. So if you just curate your own content, so most of us are either in a cost-down environment, or I keep on talking about innovation or risk management. If you just keep on sharing consistently decent stories on one of those topics that you're trying to push, you start to send a message out to people that that's what you're interested in. And it really helps reinforce, your vision and mission as a leader and what you're trying to drive. Or if you're trying to drive standardization of master data, you could just keep, sharing big data stories or the benefits. So you don't actually have to write original content to really build an image and help people understand what you're interested in. I think if you want to move to that next level and create some content, some blogging, you just shouldn't be, don't be too intimidated. And I really say to people, everyone has a unique vantage point in the world, and particularly procurement professionals. We get to see so many cool things. We get to see so many, we get so many insights to whatever it is we're managing. And, there's people out there who do want to hear about that, particularly in the procurist community, because everyone's, in the same game as you. So I don't think you should be shy, and you're not going to get it right every time, but you should definitely try, because I think the benefits outweigh the risks.
Yeah, and there's a couple of really good points that I wanted to touch on there. One is kind of access to information and sharing information. So even 15 years ago, so that's when I started in procurement, if you didn't really know or weren't sure about how to solve a problem, you were pretty restricted to maybe you can find it in a book, or maybe you can ask one of your colleagues. And if they don't know, you kind of got to make it up and hope for the best. Now
trial and error.
Exactly. There's so many people who have been in that situation and who have have had that same problem before and have had different approaches to solving that problem, that, within a half day of research, you can probably get down what might work, what might not work, but kind of target what you should do. And that explosion of information, I think, is enormous for us as professionals, just in helping to grow as professionals.
Well, and I think something that's worth reflecting on, if I could just jump in there, is that in the past, procurement did have a unique insight to certain things, but now this proliferation of information means that all your stakeholders really have access to the same information as well. So, if you want to stay ahead of the game and ahead of, your stakeholders and impress your, internal customers, then you need to be even more diligent to be on top of the latest news, so that you can be bringing news to them and insights. So I think in order to maintain our value in the organisation, we need to, keep across it all.
So where, as a profession, I think that we're naturally risk averse. And probably a lot of people are worried about sharing information, whether it gives up information for a future negotiation or whatever. Do you think that there's a case for being afraid of the risks associated with sharing too much information, or are we going to such a transparent world that that's not really important anymore?
Oh, it's absolutely important. I mean, and as a senior leader or any professional, you have to be very clear about what is sensitive information and what isn't. And that is something that we share in all our social media workshops, is that people have to remember that there is that line, and if they think they're going to cross it, they should consult their corporate affairs department and make sure it's okay. But, companies too that once were really paranoid about the dissemination of information, and now really encouraging their executives to share more, because they want to win the talent war. That's one of the biggest reasons why they want their executives sharing and showing how cool it is to work in their organisations is, if nobody talks, then nobody will think this is a good place to work. Right. So I think a lot of the restrictions on executives have loosened up, but the companies are relying on their executives to show judgment.
Yeah, and on the flip side, I think you can definitely use social media as a way to identify risks.
That's right.
Especially
Absolutely.
at a geopolitical level or at a very niche category level. You have access to information that would be impossible to get hold of in the past.
Yeah, that's right.
So you talked previously, and this is something I'm really interested in. If somebody's looking at what should they do tomorrow to kind of get started, especially from a CPO perspective, you talked about the concept of a millennial mentor. And I just thought that's a great idea, and I just wanted to understand it a little bit more.
Look, it was the best thing I could have ever done. In fact, I've had about 3 or 4, and I probably need 3 or 4 more to keep me on my toes. But look, and I think it really helps this divide that they're talking about. And I know this is a very generic type view of the world, but this divide between millennials and whatever my generation is that, you know, the use of technology is something that is vastly different between the two generations. So the more that they can understand how lame you are with technology and how savvy they are, I think they become a little bit more understanding or considerate, or at least they know where you're at. And similarly, the best way to really improve your skills is to have someone show you. So I think it fulfills a few objectives, really. And I think, you know, it's really nice for your employees to know that you're not the be-all and end-all and everything. In fact, you know, you can learn just as much from them as they can from you.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really big signal, because often it's easy to kind of be within your own bubble as opposed to really know that there's things that you can learn from people who are probably new to the organization, especially around this, around social media and how you lever kind of new communication technologies. Yeah,
exactly.
So I'm cognizant of the time, so I just want to finish with the last question. I like to touch on just an action item for our listeners. So what do you think a procurement leader should do in the next 7 days, really to start leveraging the benefits of social media? What are the baby steps?
Well, make sure you're on LinkedIn and Procurious.
Yeah.
Just upload your profile, make sure you exist. See, millennials, if you're not online, they won't even think you exist.
Right.
So just make sure you've got a profile on Procurious and LinkedIn. Yeah. And then I would just start following people that you admire or people, your peers, and just see what starts coming through on your community feed. So we are people to only spend 15 minutes a day. So just allow 15 minutes in the morning, have a look at what's coming through those channels, and and I actually also encourage people to get onto Twitter just to even get their news via Twitter. So if you subscribe to the major newspapers and news channels in your country, it gives you some great headlines that you can then take a bit of a deep dive. But if you're a busy person on the run, I think Twitter's fantastic as a news feed. LinkedIn and Procurious will just give you your professional news, but that's a great way. But start simple, just get on those professional networks. Twitter's a bonus, and don't feel like you have to start posting and tweeting yourself. Right. Just watch for a while and you'll get the hang of it.
Awesome. Yeah, it's one of those things that you may not see fantastic results overnight, because it just takes time to get acquainted with the tools, know which tools to use for what. You mentioned Twitter, and Twitter's fantastic as a news feed. I mean, that's really the number one reason why I certainly use Twitter. And over time, you invest the time in it, and as you say, I think that you start to see results. It's just something that it doesn't happen overnight, but if you stick with it, I definitely believe there's so many benefits of being engaged, and it really helps from a networking and connecting perspective too. So there's so many people that you're able to network and connect with that just wouldn't even be possible without the advent of these tools.
I mean, I'm connected to literally, I mean, I'm not sure actually, I feel like it's 400 procurement sources of information. Now, I wouldn't have even known that many sources existed.
Yeah.
So it's really fabulous. All the major universities, all the major trade publications, and then, of course, all the individuals. So you're just constantly getting this stream of really cool information. And look, I don't often have time to take the next level down, but at least I feel like I'm across what's happening in the world and the profession.
Well, Tania, I want to, I think we're running out of time, so I just want to really give you a big thank you for joining me on the Art of Procurement show today. As you heard, I am a big proponent of weathering social media. I just think that there's so many benefits to it, certainly that outweigh the risks. And it's going to be really interesting to see how Procurious evolves, because it sounds like you got a lot of big plans. And I think that there's a big opportunity there to have a central hub really for the entire procurement career. So, and help us really with that signal to noise ratio.
Well, we'd love to see you on there, and if ever you want to, share any content, we really are here and welcome you to do that. So, thank you for your time.
No problem. Well, with that, I would like to say thank you again, Tania, and for our listeners, we will talk again next time. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye. Well, thank you for listening to the show today. I hope that you found value in the conversation that Tania and I had. Now, there was just a couple of things that I omitted to say just before the end of the conversation. The first one is that all the notes and any links referenced in the show today, contact details for Tania, they can all be found online at artofprocurement.com/social. That's artofprocurement.com/social. The other thing I would really like is if you found value in the content, is if you could rate or review it on iTunes or on Stitcher. So that's a really powerful way for us to grow the community and for me to know that subjects that we're talking about on the show resonate and that provide value to you. So it would be fantastic if you're able to go and rate and review the show today. You can do that on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever it was that you downloaded today's podcast. Okay, thank you very much. I will talk to you next time.